right, 99.9 Punk World Radio FM. You guys already know what time it is. And right here, this is episode 10 of Elite Wrestle Talk. And we're joined by ECW Original. That's right, Extreme Championship Wrestling's own member of the Dudley family. That's right, we got Chubby Dudley right here, live on the radio station Airwaves. Chubby, how you doing this fine Monday night?
I am doing absolutely phenomenal. And I'm a little jealous that you have an ECW shirt and I don't.
I will admit, I was looking for one of these for a long time. I will admit, don't get me wrong, I do love the fact that WWE has produced ECW merchandise, but I fell victim and bought, I think it was an Eddie Guerrero I'm Your Poppy t-shirt, and the quality was just absolutely atrocious. So I refused to get it. It was bad, man. It was, yeah, it wasn't. I'm an old school fan, so I remember when WWE had the authentic, thick shirts. They actually had the patch they put at the bottom left side. It's nothing like that since Fanatics got a hold of it. So
really,
fool me once, you're not gonna fool me twice. So I went on eBay and I tracked down an official ECW shirt that Paulie put out back in the day, and I found this one that looked almost pretty well brand new. I was like, there's no way. The guy's like, it's been in my closet. It's been wrapped up for like 20 years. I'm like, I'll take it, dude.
You know, it's crazy. Like I had mine. I had a few of the original ones, and I had it in my old wrestling gear bag. And I went through a divorce, and as I was going through the divorce, was right before COVID. And when my divorce was finalized, was in the middle of COVID. And at that point, the lawyers were like, "All right, you have 90 days to get your stuff." And at that point, I had moved to Nashville from Philly, and we were in the middle of a lockdown. I couldn't go to Philly, so I never got my belongings, and all my ECW memorabilia and my gear bag and all my wrestling memories in that bag are God knows where.
I gotta say, I'm truly sorry about that, man. I mean, I couldn't imagine just that's your life's work right there in that bag. Like, did she put it? Like, you don't want me asking, did she put it up for auction or anything like that, or is it just something that's like?
No, we're not on very good. We're not on good terms at all. We don't speak. For all I know, she either burned it, threw it on the bottom of the Schuylkill River, or sold it. I have no idea.
Well, if anyone listening, and if you do have Chubby Dudley's wrestling gear and you bought it, you know, make sure you hit up Chubby Dudley, and, you know, maybe you guys can work something out. You never know. You got to throw the Hail Mary pass. You never know. It could have ended up at a thrift store, and someone could have been like, "Hey, Chubby Dudley's wrestling gear." You never know, right?
I had guitars too, and somebody found one of my guitars online that they had sold, and I was a little pissed about that one. But hey, shit happens, right?
But Chubby, I do know you're a very busy individual, so of course, you know, I'm going to jump right into this. But I got to take you back to the very beginning of your just in-ring talents, man, where you were actually trained by the late great Larry Winters, also known as Kenny Sullivan. I was wondering,
wait, known as what? I didn't know this.
Kenny Sullivan. Yeah, I saw that on his Wikipedia page.
Really? I wonder.
He went by quite a few names.
Yeah, I know he went by a few. I never knew that one. Okay, go ahead.
But I was wondering, what actually got you into wrestling? And of course, how did you actually first meet Larry? Because, I mean, obviously he did a phenomenal job at training you.
In the 80s, I like I mentioned the guitar. I wanted to be a quote unquote rock star. So I was trying to put bands together, play in bands, follow a musical career and path. But I was never truly a good guitarist or musician. I was more worried about trying to look good and look cool and play the rock star role than actually learning to be a true musician. And I was also, at the time, I was in high school and late teens, and I was not a person for school at all. So my backup plan, if I failed at being a rock star, was to become a professional wrestler, because I was always a chubby guy. So I always thought I had some size for it. And what started happening was in the mid to late 80s, I was a huge fan of the NWA. And it was the peak time of the Horsemen and the feuds with Dusty Rhodes, Road Warriors, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll stuff. That whole time period, I was a huge fan. And every week watching that show at noontime every Saturday, and then they left you with a cliffhanger every Saturday, and you would hear Rocket Shivani, "Oh my God, we're out of time! You gotta go!" And I was like on the side like, in my bedroom watching. I'm like on the side of my bed, like jumping up and down, like freaking out, like oh my God. And it gave me such a charge and such energy, like I would from watching a Rocky movie. So I always thought to myself, like, wow, like I could do this. I could do that. Like, I want to do this. So that became my backup plan. And then around 1990, um, I was like, I turned 20 years old and I was seriously considering it. I was like, this whole music thing, I don't think it's going to work out. Like, I'm 20 years old, and at this point, I haven't even gotten a full band together because there's always some issue with somebody, never played a club or nothing. Um, so I started looking into the wrestling thing, and it turned out my brother-in-law at the time worked with a guy who was working for Joel Goodhart and the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, and he introduced me to that guy who was the Rockin' Rebel, and Rebel introduced me to Goodhart, and I had a tryout for Goodhart's school, and joined the school, and Larry Winters was Joel's head trainer.
And I gotta say as well, it's so sad to hear about Larry as well, because I remember reading on one of the wrestling forums back in the day that he passed away of a heart attack. One of the best trainers to ever do it, man. And I just have to just say, like, pay homage to him and just say rest in peace, man, because wrestling has lost so many great individuals over the years. It's sad just thinking about it, man. Like, so many individuals I grew up watching and loving are now gone. It's definitely an industry where you see a lot of your favorites go way too young.
Yeah, and Larry was such a great guy. Larry was not like one of the, like the guys who I was going through the extreme era with, who were, we were partiers. We were hardcore partiers into the scene and the decadence of the business, and the, Larry was never that. He was not, a bad guy. He was just a great guy who truly loved the business and loved wrestling. And the crazy thing was, when because I ended up going into promotions and I was promoting shows, and I started promoting around at the end of '94. I did my very first show, and I was always intimidated to talk to guys like Larry, or at one point Larry had broke his ankle, so he was replaced as a trainer by Johnny Hotbody and Tony Stetson. But I was always intimidated by these guys because I felt like they were my elders, and I know they made like some half decent money on the indies in their prime, and I didn't want to turn around to them and insult them with low money offers and what I'd be able to pay as a promoter. They ended up coming to me, and they said, "Look, you could pay us fucking $10. We don't care. We just want to work. We love the business. We respect you, and we want to work for you. We like what you're doing, and we like your product." So they started working for me, and it was an absolute honor. And now, fast forward 30 years later, something I started a couple months ago, I have a petition going. It's on change.org. And some of these people, I feel deserve to be honored. And the ECW arena, the 2300 arena, has many banners honoring many of the guys from the heyday of ECW and a few other local indie stars that wrestled in that building. But there's 5 guys who deserve the same damn fucking respect as any other name in the business, because these 5 guys laid the foundation and groundwork for what became ECW. If it wasn't for these 5 fucking guys, I'm going to say 5 fucking guys because it makes me mad, and I want them to have their honor, their respect, and their just due as well, because they fucking deserve it. And their names are Joel Goodhart, Larry Winters, Tony Stetson, Johnny Hotbody, and DC Drake. You look up and you do your research. Anybody out there that don't know those names, who was throwing each other off of fucking second level stories in buildings? Who was going through the tables? Who was using barbed wire and all that stuff in Philadelphia and everything before ECW even was a an inkling of a thought. Those five guys, they laid the groundwork and the foundation. They deserve a banner with their name hanging from that rafters of that building. And I'm going to get it fucking done. Mark my words.
I definitely agree with you. I mean, if they laid the foundation for ECW, they laid the foundation. They were doing these match types before Polly Dangerously, Paul Heyman even launched ECW. It makes sense to have those banners.
Paulie used to work for Joe Goodhart. So Paulie knew what the Philadelphia crowd was like because he was on some of them early Tri-State Wrestling Alliance shows. So he got tipped off early. And Paul, being the smart guy that he is, he probably saw like, oh, I see what's going on here. And then when he was able to come back in on their Eddie, and then eventually take over, he's like we said before we went live, he's a mad scientist and he knows his fucking shit, and he knew what he needed to do in Philly.
And also, speaking of early ECW days, when I'm not even talking about Extreme Championship Wrestling, we're talking Eastern Championship Wrestling in late 1992, where you actually went under the name Easy Rider. I was wondering, how did you actually first get discovered by Eastern Championship Wrestling? And of course, what was it like just being there during the early days leading into ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling?
So what happened was, I was going through wrestling school, and in wrestling school, it was like the big thing, like, what's your gimmick going to be? Trying to figure out your gimmick. And they never, really could figure out what they were going to do with me. And I was going back to NWA again. I was always a huge fan of Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. And I wanted to be Beautiful Bay. And because I had the long hair, and I wanted to do like a Beautiful Bay, Beautiful Bobby Eaton gimmick. So they constantly and instantly always shot it down. They wanted no parts of it. They said it wouldn't work. I was like, all right. So my partner, HD Rider, started his training about a year after mine. And they were like, he was a true biker. And they already instantly had his gimmick. And people always thought I was a biker too. I used to wear the jacket. I had the hair, tattoos. So then they were like, wait a minute, why don't we team you guys up? Boom, we need a tag team. You guys are bikers. You look like bikers. Let's put this together and make it work. So that's how that came to be. And actually, Hot Body, Stetson, and Jimmy Janetti came up with our names.
And I got to say as well, these are...
So what happened then... Tri-State Wrestling Alliance actually went out of... We were set to debut February of 92. Tri-State Wrestling Alliance went out of business in January of 92. So we were like, what the hell do we do now? But we knew everybody from the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, which eventually became Eastern Championship Wrestling. So Eastern Championship Wrestling started, I think it was April of 92 was their first show. And in May or June... myself and HD had our tryout match, which was against Steve Richards and a guy by the name of the Delaware Dynamo who did a masked gimmick. And Todd liked us. Todd said, "You're in, you're on." So he started booking us on every show from there, and we were over. We got over instantly, and they instantly put us into a feud with the Super Destroyers, and we were green as hell, and we shouldn't have been in the ring going for the tag belts like in our second or third matches. So we were kind of thrown to the wolves, and thanks to guys like AJ and Doug from the Super Destroyers and other teams we got to work, they really taught us the ropes of tag team wrestling.
And you guys also had the opportunity, I do know, very early on as well. You got to wrestle amazing big names, and one of them being Jimmy Superfly Snuka as well. Like, what was it like just being so early on in your career, just stepping in the ring, going toe to toe with even in '92? This man was a veteran.
Yeah, it was crazy because it was the first time Snuka and Morocco, who 10 years prior, I was watching on TV in this major feud. And now I'm in the ring, and they're now a tag team. It was their first time tagging up. So it was it was kind of crazy. And the funny story with that was, um, we were doing, it was, I think, the second set of TV tapings for ECW, and me and HD were in the locker room, and Eddie Gilbert, who was the booker at the time, he posted a lineup on the wall, and everybody's running over the wall, and you're looking and you're seeing what the hell you're doing, and we're like, oh shit, and we just kind of looked at each other, and we're like, all right. So we go over to Jimmy and Morocco, and we're like, hey, we introduced ourselves. We're like, so what are we doing? Don't worry, brother. Don't worry. Plenty of time. There was like 2-3 hours before the show. They're like, plenty of time, plenty of time. Hour goes by, nothing. It's now, show has started, nothing. And we're like, what the fuck we doing? So we go back over, hey, like, what are we doing? They're like, don't worry, brother, don't worry. I'm like, oh man, this is shady. Like, this ain't cool. And we're in the gorilla position behind the curtain. The fucking music is playing. We're getting ready to go out. And we're like, what are we doing? Don't worry, brother, don't worry. And they just squashed us out and jobbed us. And if you watch that match, I was pissed. I was very pissed because we went from, like I said, we were feuding with the Super Destroyers, #1 contenders, and there was talks of giving us the belt before Eddie Gilbert came in, and now we're getting squashed. Look, it's Snuka and Morocco, I get it, but now we're getting squashed on TV. So I knew the writing on the wall. I knew we were done. So I was really, really pissed.
And also, as well, you can't build up a tag team like, obviously, you guys came in, you were fresh. They started right off the bat, right at the beginning of your guys' tag team history. You're putting you guys up for the belt. I mean, that means they're building you guys up. And then just to get torn down by Jimmy Superfly Snuka, like you said, it is Jimmy Superfly Snuka. But what's the point of building? What's the point of building you guys up and then throwing you on TV to get squashed? I mean, that is bad booking, in my honest opinion.
Well, no, you know what? It was smart booking because, again, if you go back and you watch those matches, the very first match in ECW TV history is us against the Super Destroyers. You watch that match, like, I see now why. Because we sucked. We were so green, we deserved to get squashed. So, I mean, that's the thing with the wrestling business. And that's the thing, outsiders might not understand. If you're working the indies and you're doing these shows and you're in, community centers and boys clubs and high school gymnasiums or wherever you're doing it, okay, that's one thing. When you're now taking it to a level where there's TV, it's a completely different level. Like, we went from doing that, and literally we were on TV, and even in the Eastern days, when it was very new to the Philadelphia area, I mean, people would stop me. I'd be like in the mall, and people would stop me for autographs. I was like, the hell? Like, I couldn't believe it. It was very weird.
And also, as well, actually, late '93, you actually left Eastern Championship Wrestling, or technically ECW, for the first time. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about why you actually left the first time, and of course, what was it like just touring the Mid-Atlantic after your departure?
I don't. We actually probably didn't leave. They just stopped booking us. I mean, so they got rid of us, as Eddie did with most of the local Philly people. He slowly weeded out the talent that was not good for TV, and that was us. We were not ready for TV. So now we were thrown to the independent scene in the Philadelphia area, and I instantly got hooked up with Jim Kettner in Delaware with the ECWA, East Coast Wrestling Association, where it's crazy. This guy was 25 minutes down the road south in Delaware. I never heard of him. I never heard of his federation. And he was in business at that point for 25, 30 years. It was like weird. And it was like going into like a twilight zone, because even though it was only 25 minutes down the road, it was like going back to the old time of wrestling, where it was the total good guy, bad guy, and the fans believed. It was a total different world from the ECW crowd. So Kettner brought me in, but he didn't want my partner. He only wanted me as to work singles. So that I was weirded out about that, and he just called me the Hell Rider. So I worked for Kettner for 2 years, and he instantly put me at his as his number one heel, feuding against his top babyface, Boogie Woogie Brown. He was a like 400-pound guy who was he was like his version of Dusty Rhodes. This guy was great. He was freaking amazing. Beautiful, beautiful person. And another guy that left us too soon. Cliff, rest in peace, man. But wow, it was fun times working for Kettner. And actually, I just got called about a month ago. The guy that now owns and runs ECWA is doing a documentary on Jim Kettner. And he called me up and he said, "Hey," he goes, "I'm doing this documentary and I'm doing an ECW reunion show in August. And Kettner asked me to track you down and come be interviewed for the documentary. So I'm looking forward to being part of that."
It's actually really cool that they actually reached out to you. But again, you spent 2 years at the ECWA, so I mean that's a huge chunk in any promotion's history. So it's really cool that you actually get a chance to kind of tell your side and pay homage to
Yeah.
such a great promoter.
It was so fun, and I met his locker room was an amazing bunch of guys. One of the guys was actually became Simon Diamond in ECW in late '90s, early 2000s. Um, he, I mean, they were just great guys. But I was there until I went back to ECW as a Dudley, and I remember when I talked to Jim about it, like I was really bummed. Because what Jim was building, I really loved and believed in and became part of. But then I had this opportunity, and Jim was like, "Look, if you're going to work for them, I can't use you. I can't." He goes, "First off, I can't use their gimmick. That's not going to work, and I can't use you as a Hell Rider anymore because everybody's going to know you as a Dudley because of TV." So we remained friends for a long time, and that guy taught me so much about the wrestling business, about promoting. He helped me start my promotion when I started promoting shows. I mean, I'll be forever indebted to Jim Kettner.
And also, speaking of Chubby Dudley and returning to ECW, which at this point it was Extreme Championship Wrestling, and that happened in mid 1995. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about how Paul Heyman got a hold of you and how you actually ventured back to ECW, and of course, just the origin behind Chubby Dudley and how you became a member of the Dudley family.
Steve Richards. Me and Steve Richards went through wrestling school together. We were good friends. Um, I when I had my falling out with ECW, when I stopped getting booked, I stopped watching the products. I didn't know what was going on. I was very angry and very bitter, and I ended up starting my own promotion. Um, and at one point, I flipped it on for some reason, and the Dudleys had just debuted. And I remember sitting there watching it like, holy shit, I look like a fucking Dudley. Like, I would be perfect in this gimmick. And a week later, Richards called me. He goes, "Hey," he goes, we we have this new gimmick that we started." And I said, "The Dudleys." And he started laughing. He said, "Yeah." He goes, "One of the guys got hurt. He was in a car accident. We have a spot. Are you interested?" I'm like, absolutely. Um, so he said, "All right." He goes, "The arena show's this weekend. Come to the hotel afterwards. I'll introduce you to Paul. We'll see what he says." I said, "All right, great." So we're in the hotel lobby, and me and him are talking, and Paul comes walking up to us. And before Richards even said anything, Paul goes, "Oh my God, another fucking Dudley." And Richards is like, "This is the guy I was telling you about." So Paul was like, "Do you have a tie-dye?" I said, "No." He goes, "Get a tie-dye." I said, "Okay." He goes, "What do you want your gimmick to be?" So me, thinking again, Beautiful Bay, I said, "Studley Dudley." He said, "No, not going to work." He said, "Bring food, you're Chubby Dudley." And that's how it happened, just like that.
I gotta say, Studley Dudley is also. I mean, Chubby Dudley. Obviously, I think it's because we've known you as Chubby Dudley for over 30, almost 30 years. But I gotta say, Studley Dudley is actually a pretty freaking amazing name as well.
Right. It would have worked. Would have worked wonders. And even the Chubby gimmick, they never. There's so much that could have been done with that gimmick that they dropped the ball on.
I mean, they could have even called you Chubby the Studley Dudley. I mean, that still even works too. I mean, it's kind of catchy. It's long, but it's catchy.
The funny thing is, there was the groupies back then. I had a few of them that would follow me around to the shows, and the guys in the back, and Sabu came up with this name. The guys in the back would make fun of me because they would be dressed like a Dudley in the crowd, and Sabu said, "You have chubby chasers," and that's what my groupies got nicknamed, the Chubby Chasers.
But you know what? I mean, that definitely is something Sabu would say. I could definitely just picture Sabu sitting there with his like wrestling gear on, being like, "How are the Chubby Chasers tonight?" I can picture Sabu saying that.
Absolutely.
But also as well, man, April 8th of 1995, legendary wrestler Eddie Guerrero actually debuted in Extreme Championship Wrestling. Were you actually there the night that Eddie Guerrero debuted? And of course, can you tell us a bit more about what it was like having him in the locker room during those times?
Honestly, I don't remember if I was there for the debut. I'm not sure of my actual start date. I'd have to look up like the ECW TV history and all that stuff. But yes, I was there for a little bit of Eddie's run. Eddie was a really, really just great guy, fun guy. That whole group of guys, like when Malenko was there and Rey Mysterio and all them, they were all amazing. And then they went off to WCW and did their thing, and even into bigger pastures with Vince. But I hadn't seen Eddie. I mean, it might have been 7-8 years. And at the very first Ring of Honor show, was at the time I was promoting, and myself with Liberty All Star Wrestling and Ring of Honor. The funny, crazy thing was, Rob Feinstein, who owned Ring of Honor at the time, he was filming my shows. And I was at his offices going over some things with our stuff and on and shows. And I was like all excited because I had just booked the Murphy Rec Center building. And he was like, and him and his partner at the time, Doug, they both just looked at me and they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "I'm running a show on this date." And they're like, "What the fuck?" They're like, "We just booked it and we're running the Saturday after you." So there was like a little bit of tension there now because we're both running the same building. But so I went to that show and Eddie was the main event. And I was in the locker room, and Eddie's looking at me, and he's looking, and he's pointing. I'm like, "Chubby Dudley." He's like, "Oh, my God, brother." And he gave me the biggest hug, and we just, like, talked for, like, 10 minutes. And he was like, it was like seeing an old, like, family member or friend. He was, like, truly interested in how I've been and what I've been up to and what I was doing. I mean, and that really, I'll never forget that moment. I could still literally picture it to this day in that locker room. It was just an amazing, amazing moment, and being able to talk to Eddie again and see Eddie. I mean, everybody was really with me. I mean, I never had problems with anybody. It was just great to see and get along with everybody.
And I got to say as well, definitely Eddie Guerrero is honestly one of the best wrestlers to ever do it, in my honest opinion. I've never heard anyone actually say anything bad about Eddie Guerrero. Like, I mean, I've never heard anyone say anything bad, even if it was slightly nothing but positive when it comes to Eddie Guerrero.
In all these, sadly, in all these, deaths that we've experienced in the wrestling world over the years, and there was a lot that I've had to go through with, a lot of the people from ECW. Eddie's was one that hit me one of the hardest truly. Still, like when I watch his matches and see promos of him, and I get really bummed out and sad. It really hits me.
And also, as well as going back to your ECW run as Chubby Dudley, I do know as well that I've heard many from many different individuals that you actually wanted more in-ring competition time as Chubby Dudley rather than just being the manager and bringing the food and whatnot. I was wondering if you can just tell us a bit more about why Paul didn't actually give you more in-ring competition, because I know Big Dick Dudley, I know Spike Dudley, obviously, even though he was getting tossed around like a rag doll every single night, but like all the Dudleys were getting in-ring time, but unfortunately you didn't get a lot. I was wondering if you can tell us a bit more about like why, if you do know why Paulie wouldn't put you in the ring.
I do not know the honest, legitimate answer. I would love. Yeah, I have my thoughts on it, and I would love to. Who knows if Paul would even fucking remember at this point? It's 30 years later, but talk with Paul, or even like I've seen Dreamer over the years, and Dreamer always treats me very respectfully and talks with me, but I never ask. It's like if I was doing an interview with them, then I most definitely, that's gonna be the first question out of the fucking gate. With him, Dreamer, especially with Taz, because we've had our little run in that's been very well publicized. But I think it's because I was very, very good, close friends with Dennis Carluzzo from the NWA. And I was also, I was helping Dennis a little bit with the booking of his shows for the NWA behind the scenes. I was renting Dennis's Pennsylvania promoter's license. I also, there was one night, there was a night where something with fire happened at the arena. Dennis was on me the whole time I was in ECW to come work for him, come work for him. Fuck them, work for me, I'll pay you good, I'll treat you good. And I got a bug up my ass about something, and I was like, all right, fuck it. Because I wanted to work. So I went and worked for Dennis, and it was the night of an arena show, and I walked in the locker room, and Sabu was there. And Sabu ended up working Devon Storm that night. And I walk in the locker room, Sabu looks at me, and I look at him, and we're both like, what are you doing here? So, but that ended up, Sabu had this amazing match with Devon Storm, which led for Devon heading into ECW afterwards. And, the next week, both myself and Sabu ended up back in ECW. And I think, they naturally got wind of that I did that. And they were like, fuck this guy, And plus, two, I never traveled and did the New York shows. So they never knew when I was going to show up. I would just show up for stuff in Pennsylvania, Delaware, even South Jersey. But I never went up to New York because I worked. At the time I was delivering pizzas. My big money making nights to survive was my Fridays and Saturdays. So I wasn't going to take off a Friday and Saturday and drive over 2 hours to New York and lose half my week's pay. So, they never, and again, that's my fault. It's both of ours fault. It's a two-way street because I never took the initiative because I was a green scared kid I'm in there now with all these guys who I saw on TV, and I was very intimidated. And I never sat them down and said, look, here's my situation. What can I do? What can I expect? How can we work around this? How can we figure this out? And they never came to me either and said, look, Chubby, this is what we want to do. Can we get a commitment from you? If they did that, I would have fucking, boom, I would have been in. I would have committed, and I would have said, fuck the work. I would have made my way around it and figured it out. But conversations never happened.
And I gotta say as well, man, your run as Chubby Dudley, in my honest opinion, is absolutely iconic. I do know that there is some clear confusion between yourself and Sign Guy back in the day, because you guys were absolute, like, literally twins. I really, I know, obviously I know, but in a way, it's almost like you guys are like, kind of like the Parent Trap situation, two like twins separated at birth. Because like back in the day, you guys were absolutely identical. It was crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even Dudley, Jeff Bradley, at that time too. I mean, he had a very strong resemblance to the two of us too. He was a little thinner, but yeah. I mean, the three of us, especially me and Lou, we looked complete twins.
And when we booked this interview, I actually had a user submitted question actually come through, and they actually were wondering. Obviously, ECW. We all know that like the locker room was known to be absolutely wild. It was a very wild promotion, like in front of the camera, in the ring, and outside of the ring. What is one of the most craziest things you actually saw off camera, backstage? Like, is there anything that you recall where you're like, excuse my language, fuck, that's still insane, even 30 years later.
Craziest thing was the fight with Pillman and New Jack was the absolute craziest fucking thing I saw in that locker room because um, Pillman had steel rods going through his leg. Like you saw those rods going through his leg. There was like three or four. And they were big fucking rods holding his leg in place. Of all people you're going to get into a fist fight with is fucking New Jack. You know? New Jack was ready to fucking kill him. And Pillman was not backing down. And Pillman was ready to go. And there was a literal pull apart as soon as Pillman came through the back. Because I think he said the N-word on the mic in the crowd. He said the N-word somewhere. And fucking New Jack lost his shit. And yeah, it literally happened like right there in front of me, and I got right in. I was like caught in the middle of the two of them, like doing the pull apart. It was craziest fucking thing I ever saw, because I always kept saying to myself too, Pillman was doing that gimmick, but I kept saying to myself, I think the motherfucker lost his mind. I think he's legit crazy, and he had a crazy look in his eyes, like that last part of his career. So when that happened, I was like, oh, the fucking Pillman's off his rocker.
And I do remember as well, because obviously I never met New Jack, I don't know, I wasn't there, but I always thought that he was a bona fide gangster. Like, I mean, New Jack was absolutely crazy. If you watch his matches, that guy wouldn't care if he was on top of the arena. He would jump off onto you. But he always had that vibe to him that he was a bona fide gangster. Like, he will knock you out. He wouldn't even think about it. He'll just knock the bricks right off you, man.
New Jack didn't give a fuck. He I was always thankful he liked me and he was on my side. Yeah, that was the one thing. Like, there was an incident that happened at the Travel Lodge one night, and I had his back with this fucking guy, and I think from then on, he always respected me for that and was always good to me. And I actually had, I guess this was about 15 years ago, I did like a dinner, like a get together at a bar, reunion thing, and fucking New Jack showed up. So it was, and that was the last time I seen New Jack. I think it was the last time I saw him. But yeah, I mean, New Jack was always good to me.
And just going back to the fight for a moment, I have to ask: was it just you that actually jumped in front of New Jack and Brian Pillman? Or
no.
Other individuals jumped in too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was the whole locker room, and they were both hollering and screaming at each other, cursing each other out. Yeah, it was crazy, crazy.
It probably didn't help as well, because I do know around this time. I was gonna say, I do know around the locker room time. I do know as well. I believe around this time there was LSD going through the locker room as well. So I mean, if they were on that shit, good luck getting them. Good luck getting them apart.
Wait, there's what, LSD? Is that what you said?
I heard a story. Yeah, I heard a story that Sandman did LSD and then went out to a match and whatnot, and was whipping ladders and whatnot, going crazy.
I mean, that's That's possible. I mean, honestly, there. I personally didn't really see stuff like that going on in the locker room. Okay, the only one I saw drinking before shows in the locker room was always Sandman. He would come in with a cooler of beer and just be hanging out drinking the whole time. But I never saw any open drug use before or during the locker room or anything like that. Now, after shows, back at the hotel, I mean, forget it. It was complete fucking insanity. I mean, there was drugs, pills, alcohol, sex, everything. It was just a complete free for all.
It was just your typical post-show, wrestling party. I mean, it was the '90s. Everyone was doing crazy shit.
Yeah. It was literally like being a rock star. It was crazy stuff.
And also as well, July 13th of 1996 at ECW's pay-per-view Heatwave, Devon Dudley actually ended up attacking Dances, yourself, Sign Guy, and then delivering, of course, the infamous low blow to Bubba Ray. Looking back on this legendary pay-per-view, I was wondering if you could actually just tell us a bit more about the behind-the-scenes of this particular night, and of course, what was it like just working alongside a then young Devon Dudley?
You know what? Like, when Devon came in, my initial reaction again, though, was the same when Bubba came in. Like, who's this guy? Where did he come from? And he's really green, maybe even greener than me. And why am I not getting a shot? That was my initial reactions. But within, a month or two, you saw like their comfort level now, getting more used to working with the locker room and the crowd and everything. I saw, now I saw probably what Paulie saw, and the potential and the upside with those guys was way higher with them than somebody like me. And once Devon, before Devon came in, we were just kind of like, comedy fluff of the evening. We gave you a little laugh, a little chuckle, some fun, and they just didn't really know what they were going to do with us still. When Devon came in, they started putting the pieces together of the feud with Devon and the rest of us. And that really started turning the tide for the Dudleys, because now all of a sudden the Dudleys were getting hardcore like the rest of the locker room, and the crowd was taking notice, and it really it really put the Dudleys on the map.
And I do know as well that chair shot that he buckled you with. I at the end of the day, man, I actually had sympathy, man. Even almost 30 years later, man, like just rewatching that, you know what I mean, that pay-per-view and seeing that you can definitely tell that buckled, man. He definitely did not let up with that chair shot. It definitely was 100%.
Nobody let up with any chair shots, especially ones that I took. And I mean, I took dozens like that. And there was that one, and there was a couple other, especially from Devon, that I remember taking and laying on that mat and just laying there thinking to myself, what the fuck am I doing? Because I mean, I probably had concussions and didn't even realize it. I mean, my bell was rung.
And I do know as well, I've actually heard Devon actually say recently in an interview, I know he spoke about this many times throughout his career doing shoot interviews and whatnot, but I watched one recently right after we booked this interview, and it totally popped in my head, because obviously, you're part of the Dudley family. Devon actually stated in a previous interview that he actually used to try and track Spike down to go over like what we're going to do tonight, and Spike would actually hide. I don't know if you actually ever had the opportunity to encounter that. I heard that, yeah, he actually used to hide in, like, the bathroom and whatnot. Like, he actually said that one day he went into the bathroom at the ECW arena and was like, Spike, you in here? And I guess, like, it was nothing, but then he heard a cough coming from the
no
phone,
way.
and he was hiding.
That's just
because he knew he was... He knew he was gonna get it. He was gonna get whipped around like a rag doll, so he was hiding so he wouldn't have to do it. Did you ever actually like notice Spike Dudley actually like hiding around those times, or this was like really? Because I do know back then there was probably like a very green Spike Dudley.
Yeah, see when Spike came in, that's when I ended up leaving, because that's what hit my frustration level, because Spike came in his first night and instantly had a match, and I was like, wait a minute, you flew this guy in from California, and I live 20 minutes away. So I knew the writing on the wall, and I was done. At that point I mentally checked out, and I stopped going probably a month later, because I was just like, I'm done. Like I'm going there. I'm getting probably concussions, getting my head whacked in. I'm getting put through tables. I'm getting super bombed off top ropes, and yeah.
Did Paul ever like I end up contacting you and being like, "Hey, Chubby, like nothing, just pretty much just like, wow." I mean, at the end of the day, you would have thought you would have at least wanted to check on your talent and be like, "Hey, Chubby, want to make sure you're good, like everything okay?" Like no calls, no nothing.
If I was a Rob Van Dam or a Sabu, yeah, he would have been calling. But I was just part of the sideshow. I was the lucky guy. I was lucky enough to be there, to where 30 years later, people like yourself want to still talk to me and remember me and give a shit. So, I'm the one that was at the right place at the right time, and I knew that at the time. I knew I was, because I would say to myself constantly, I am part of wrestling history. This is amazing stuff, and people are going to remember this stuff. Did I think 30 years later people were still going to remember it? No. But at this point right now, I feel Chubby Dudley is at a higher point than ever in my 30 plus year career now.
And not to mention as well, because I do know a lot of wrestling fans, the ones that don't really know the rich history of even ECW or just wrestling in general. When they think the Dudley Boys, or the Dudleys, they think Team 3D, they think Bubba Ray and Devon.
Right.
But they forget about who really came first, who actually launched this. It was yourself, it was Sign Guy, it was Big Dick. It was these legendary Dudley family members that really launched it. They're the foundation of the pinnacle of the statue. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't think about the Dudley Boys without thinking about yourself, Chubby Dudley, Big Dick Dudley, you know what I mean, Sign Guy, because you guys are the pinnacle. You guys are like the ones that laid the foundation for this legendary tag team, or in this case, stable.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do remember and recognize, but there's probably, out of 100% of the wrestling fans, maybe 35% that know and remember.
And before we move up to ECW days, obviously we talked about the most craziest thing that happened in the locker room. But the one thing I have to know, because obviously, like you mentioned a few moments ago, your career is absolutely stellar. It's a monumental career that you actually had, and you're a huge part of wrestling history. What is one of your most fondest memories of the Extreme Championship Wrestling days? Is there still a memory that you actually have from those days where you always sit back, kick your feet up, and be like, man, that was a good day. That was a good memory.
I mean, so many. There was just. I mean, literally just sitting in that locker room. They would have a little TV monitor set up this way we could watch, what was going on, and I would just sit there and be like, my mouth open. Whether it was the moment when Shane grabbed Gary Wolf when he had the halo with the broken neck, and he grabbed it and started shaking it, and I was like, holy fuck, what is going on? Like, my first impression is, Gary's lost his mind to allow this. Like, what is going on? I mean, so many moments with Hack, and just being so over. Just as soon as he went through that curtain and that Enter Sandman playing, being in the locker room with, I mean, Chris Benoit and Nancy, knowing them. Nancy was such a beautiful, beautiful person. Beautiful person. So nice. Um, Missy Hyatt, the Steiners, Terry Gordy, Dreamer, Taz, Raven. Like, uh, so many iconic moments that happened, iconic feuds that were probably some of the greatest all time feuds in wrestling that took it to the extreme and really just changed the face of wrestling. I mean, I would sit there watching that stuff, and I'd be popping, seeing it. I'm all the Cactus Jack moments, the Steve Austin moment, like all those times were just amazing, 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 amazing.
And just when you say amazing times as well, like history making moments, my favorite ECW history making moment is when Tommy Dreamer, was getting those vicious kendo stick wax to his back over and over again. I feel that's really what made Tommy Dreamer on who he was, because I feel even before then they weren't taking, like, the fans and that's everyone in the locker room weren't really taking Tommy Dreamer seriously as a hardcore wrestler. But I think after that day, it really solidified Tommy Dreamer into the hardcore wrestling industry, man. Just with those vicious whacks, like, may I have another, sir? I mean, even me watching this, still 30 years later, I have the DVDs, me watching it. I still yell at the TV and be like, God damn it, Dreamer, stay the fuck down. Like, obviously you can't hear me, but I still say, like, stay down, man. Like, that's brutal.
I remember when that aired, and I watched it, and I kept saying to myself, "What the fuck is he doing? Why is he doing this?" Now, a little bit afterwards, I got it and I understood, because he was not over at all. That ECW arena crowd from day one, and the Philadelphia wrestling fans, and I've said this for 30 plus years. If you are a wrestler and you can get over with the true Philly wrestling crowd, you can get over anywhere in the world. If you can't get over with the Philly crowd, you're done. You can't do it. So when Dreamer did that, it fucking earned so much respect of that crowd, because everybody looked at him the same way I looked at him, and I'm sure if you ask anybody, they looked at Tommy as this kind of pretty boy wannabe. They never expected him to be this hardcore guy. He would come out with his suspenders and all that. Like, when he did that, he proved that he was a legit tough badass, and he'll take anything thrown at him. And that's what he ended up turning his career into. And that dude took a lot of fucking beatings.
And I gotta say as well, I had the opportunity to meet Tommy Dreamer not once but twice, and both times I met him, such a phenomenal, nice individual, man. I met him once at a barbershop. They were doing like a pop-up show at a barbershop, and then I met him at a wrestling convention. And honestly, the things he's accomplished in his career, even outside of ECW, because I do know obviously had a very brief run within WWE. I mean, I will say it wasn't the best run. I feel like he definitely deserved a hell of a lot more than what Vince McMahon got him, but I always felt, I know this is like obviously an ECW interview type thing, but I have to say I feel that the ECW talent and also some of the WCW talent never really got the proper recognition that they deserved when ECW and WCW got bought up by Vincent Kennedy McMahon. I feel so many wrestlers deserve so much more, like Buff Bagwell's one of them, you know what I mean? Tommy Dreamer, Sandman, all the people, even Sabu was in WWE for a little bit as well. So many wrestlers that went on to WWE got shit on, man, from like those other companies. I really wish Vince would have gave these talent a chance, man, and really gave them the recognition and the accolades that they truly deserve as professional wrestlers.
But it just, you know what, it wouldn't have worked, because what those guys did in ECW, Tommy, Hack, Sabu, they would not be able to make that transformation to that WWE crowd. It was just, they weren't meant to do that. Tommy was able to get over in certain spots where they put him in, where he was able to do his extreme stuff, and he would get over because that's what people knew him as. But he couldn't do that on a 24/7 level working for WWE. The only one who really I feel a true person that was came from ECW that made that transformation is Rob Van Dam. I think he was the only one that truly was able to make that transition to get over with the WWE crowd. I think Sabu even he wouldn't have been able to just because of his style. It was not meant for that.
And also as well, I gotta say, like, I do know as well that even I think with Sandman as well, I heard a little shoot interview that he did that he actually mentioned that it was something to do with a cigarette on a plane is why he got fired or something like that. He didn't even light it. He just had it in his mouth and then he was walking out and supposedly somebody ratted him out that he was smoking on a plane. That's what I heard. It was an old ass shoot interview, but even stuff like that, I feel like Vince kind of wanted to just kind of use little things to get rid of them.
I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, I've known Hack since day one in the wrestling business. My first night in wrestling school, we went to the same wrestling school. He came from Joel Goodhart's Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. My first night in wrestling school, I walked in, and Hack was one of the first guys I met. And Hack goes, "Hey, I'm Mr. Sandman. Call me Hack. And just to let you know, this is honest to God on my parents' grave. This is what he says to me. He goes, I just want to let you know, I'm an asshole, and I know it. And I was he was 29, I was 20. I was a 20-year-old kid, and I'm thinking to myself, I've never in my life have anybody just come right out and say, "Hey, I'm an asshole, and I know it." Like, who does that? Like, all right.
But you know what? It's always the realest ones, man, in my honest opinion. I'm the same way personally. Like, I'll tell you straight up. That way, down the line, 3 months later, you won't have to be like, oh, man, this guy's a dick. It's like, well, like I told you 3 months ago that I was a dick. Why didn't you listen,
You in life, you have to be real. And Hack proved it because he tried faking that stupid surfer gimmick that he was not. The guy probably, who knows if he even knows how to swim, okay? Let's be real. He fucking was able to ditch it and be himself. And in my opinion, he's one of the most over wrestlers of all fucking time. I'm sorry, like the other night with that Backlash. If you put Sandman out into that crowd at Backlash or in April, at which I was begging, Triple H, I think, dropped the ball. He should have paid fucking Metallica $1 million or whatever they needed for the royalties or the rights just to use Enter Sandman for one time and the fucking DVD or whatever. It would have blown the fucking foundation off of the building.
Man, I would kill to hear Enter Sandman.
Greatest ring entrance of all time.
I would kill to just actually either be in attendance or even see it on pay-per-view, for instance, and just hear Enter Sandman hit, and then see Sandman come out with the kendo stick and the beer can smashing it. I'm telling you, as a kid, growing up watching ECW, my biggest dream was to have Sandman pour beer into my mouth. People were like, "You're too young. You were too young." I'd be like, "Fuck it, I'll tell him I'm 19." You know what I mean? Here in Canada, you got to be 19. I would tell that man I'm 19. He would look at me. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think obviously these shows took place in the States, so I'd have to be 21, but...
Yeah. That's funny.
But also as well, aside from ECW and whatnot, today, currently, you actually have your own radio show called React and Chill with Chubby Dudley. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about your show, and of course, where can we actually stream and watch it today?
So what I started doing, I actually started about 1.5 years ago. I have multiple shows. I also have the Bay Ragni show where I do interviews like yourself, like what you're doing. I do a lot of music interviews, TV, movies, wrestling, etc. And I've been doing that for over 10 years. So one of the guys I interviewed, who I became very, very good, close friends with, a guy by the name of Rayan Belcher, who Rayan used to play bass for somebody who you might know, Wednesday 13.
Yes.
From the Murder Dolls.
Phenomenal.
So,
band.
Yes. On Wednesday's first solo album and tour, Rayan was Wednesday's bass player. And also, Wednesday's side project, Bourbon Crow, was with Rayan. So Rayan, about a year and a half ago, he sends me a text and he's like, "Yo, brother," he goes, "Are you up?" It was like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, "Yeah." Calls me. He's like, "Dude, I just got home a couple hours ago from this gig, and I'm laying in bed and I'm watching ECW, and I'm thinking to myself, man, wouldn't it be cool to watch ECW with Bay and hear his thoughts on the match, his reactions, what he's thinking, what he knows about what happened backstage or what with these guys?" He's like, "Dude, you need to do a reaction channel." And I was like, "Holy fuck, that's genius." So I was like, "I'm doing it." Within 2 weeks, I pulled it together, got it situated, and launched it. And what I'm doing is I'm literally going through match by match from the very beginning days of ECW and watching the history of ECW and doing reaction videos and giving my take, my thoughts, my honest, true opinions on the matches and the guys, girls, etc., and what happened. And that, which I'm still a year and a half, I'm still only 6 months into the TV because I'm doing match by match. But so many people have been asking questions and commenting and asking about, this guy and that guy and where's this one and where's that one. And I'm like, well, shit, I do interviews. I should just start interviewing the guys and catching up with everybody. So now I have two different shows on the same channel. So I'm doing Chewing the Fat with Chubby Dudley. And usually on Sunday nights, I'll go live and I'll pull somebody out of the old ECW archives and sit down with them. And I've dusted a few people off that people haven't heard from in 30 years, and people are loving it. They're going nuts because they haven't seen or heard from some of these people since Eastern Championship Wrestling. These guys are getting to sit down and tell their stories, tell their feelings, their thoughts, and everything. And people are loving it even more because it's truly no holds barred. It's true shoot interviews, and there's no time limit. We had one interview went 5.5 hours. So people are now getting upset if I have an interview go under 2 hours. So
but I do got to say,
you can just go on YouTube.
Briefly.
Just go on YouTube, YouTube, and also I have a Facebook too, but the same handle at Chubby Dudley Official. Go there, subscribe. I just dropped a new reacting show last night. This Sunday night coming up, I have Iron Man Tommy Cairo will be chewing the fat, sweet. And Tommy's got a lot of stuff. I know he's been dying to get off his chest for many years. I've been contacted by people like Todd Gordon, who I'm hoping he'll chew the fat one point. But Todd has been shocked by people's reaction, I'll say that. But Todd, more importantly, out of anything, me and Todd were able to sit down and have a very nice conversation and reconnect. Like we've seen each other at conventions and stuff over the years in passing, but we've had some very nice conversations over the last couple of months. And actually, 2 weeks ago, I actually had 5 heart attacks 2 weeks ago, and Todd reached out to me and checked on me, which really meant a lot, and I really appreciated that.
And I will admit, I actually saw that, and I'm not gonna lie. I'm so glad to actually hear and see that you are still here with us. Like we talked about earlier on in this interview. You know what I mean? That so many wrestlers, unfortunately, tragically passed at very early age. So I'm just really glad to hear that ECW did not lose another legend like yourself, and I'm glad you're still here. You obviously are in great spirits. I can tell you're feeling better, so that is absolutely positive.
I feel
so
phenomenal.
Shout out to those Nashville doctors for taking care of old Chubby Dudley. Us wrestling fans, I'm pretty sure I can speak for every ECW fan and every Chubby Dudley fan. Thank you for saving this amazing, kind-hearted legend. Thank you so much. Shout out to Nashville Hospital.
Thank you.
But But I do have to ask, how are you feeling? Actually, I have to ask that because I'm pretty sure people are wondering how are you feeling, man?
I honestly, I feel phenomenal. I feel freaking amazing. I feel actually so much better than before it happened. I just, with my schedule with work, I work a lot of hours. This past weekend was like our busy time of the year, so I've worked like 30 hours in the last 3 days. So I've been a little tired, but overall, I still feel absolutely freaking great.
I gotta say though, I gotta give you a props, man. Honestly, you deserve an award because I've never even knew or heard of anyone until this very day and this moment that had 5 mini heart attacks less than 2 weeks ago, and then go back immediately and work 30 hours. I mean, you were absolutely like you're a machine, man. You should be called Chubby Immortal Dudley because honestly, you should just take my name away from me. That's all I gotta say.
When I was telling the cardiologist as I was laying in the hospital bed and they came in and they were starting to do some tests and I'm telling him what happened and he's just sitting there and he's looking at me. He's like, okay, so wait a minute. I want to explain this to you. You had 5 heart attacks and you waited till the end of your shift to clock out and then come to the hospital. He's like, people don't do that.
Did you know you were having heart attacks, or was it just something you were like, oh man, like maybe it's this little tightening? You had no, did you have any idea at that point?
I had a major what happened was I do catering, so I had these huge catering orders, and I was bringing the first order into the building, and I had to walk like 100 yards to get to the building, and I'm pushing and carrying all this food, and I got to the my setup spot, and it was like somebody just wrapped a belt around my chest and just was pulling it as tight as humanly possible, and then I had this very extreme because that's what it was. It was a very extreme pain in both of my like bicep areas, my upper arms, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" Like, and I was by myself, and I was just like kind of looking around, like, "What should I do?" And just was slowly going about my setup and continued on, and it went away after a few minutes. So I was like, "All right." So over the next 24 hours, every time I made a delivery 5 times, it happened. So after the fourth time, now I'm like Googling because now I'm like getting worried. I'm like something's definitely off here, and it was saying about you know heart issue, take baby aspirin. So I ran across the street to the supermarket, got some baby aspirin, took a bunch of baby aspirin, and I'm like, all right, I got 3 hours before my next run. Let me see what happens. If it happens again, I'm going right to the hospital. So it happened again, and got back, clocked out, went right to the hospital.
And I bet you that aspirin definitely saved your life, man. I mean, I heard aspirin is absolutely like obviously doesn't work all the time, obviously because it's different with people. But I've heard that aspirin definitely helps prolong more severe symptoms.
Yeah, it's crazy. Baby aspirin. Who knew, right?
I mean, I think it's probably just a bonus they had. I mean, obviously, when they made it for babies, it's to, probably for teething or pain or heart or like headaches. But yeah, I think it was more of just like when they realized it works for heart attacks as well. They're probably like, damn, okay, like
Yeah.
two birds with one stone.
There you go.
But I gotta say, first and foremost, Chubby, again, it's such an honor to speak with you. I'm super glad and happy to see that you're doing better. You're feeling great. You got everything situated. I'm glad to see you're still here with us, man. And thank you again for this amazing interview, man. It was such an honor talking with ECW original Chubby Dudley. I mean, like I said, you are an absolute staple, not only within ECW, but professional wrestling history at that. If it wasn't for individuals like yourself, you paved the way for Devon and Bubba Ray. Like, you were the foundation of the Dudley family. So thank you so much for what you did for professional wrestling. Thank you so much for putting your body and your career on the line so crazy fans like us can cheer and say, one more chair shot, bring the tables, Thank you, man, for just years of entertainment.
No more chair shots, no more tables. Just thank you. Thank you for even giving a shit, seriously. And not only you, but everybody out there. Like, I truly appreciate everybody. I've been making it's amazing. I've been making like friends. I mean, I call everybody friends that, people that I interact with now on Facebook, on my Facebook page, or a lot of people on my YouTube page that are always commenting. I mean, I'm just blown away, and just truly the amount of appreciation and true love I have for everybody that gives a fuck about me with what little I did in the business. I mean, I'm very, very appreciative.
And Chubby, I do know as well that we actually, you obviously mentioned your social media handles, but I do know we talked about a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of ground in this interview. So for people that might have actually forgot, how do we actually follow not only yourself, but of course your amazing radio show, and your radio shows, I should say, across all social media platforms? That way we can stay updated on everything that the legendary Chubby Dudley is currently doing for professional wrestling today.
You can just look for me, Bay Ragni. I'm on Facebook. On Instagram, it's the Bay Ragni Show. Chubby Dudley Official, or Totally Driven TV on YouTube.
Thank you so much again, Bay. It was such an honor speaking with you. Like I said, I'm glad to see you're back to 100%, and I'm looking forward to your next broadcast on YouTube. But for now, have yourself a phenomenal Monday night, and again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You too.